Is Zack Snyder done in Hollywood? That's the question we're all asking ourselves after Rebel Moon has been released to very, very bad reviews. With nearly a $200 million budget sanctioned by Netflix, even those who were calling for the Snyderverse and the Snyder Cut and for Snyder to be unleashed with DC are beginning to have their second thoughts. Today we're diving into it, and is this far, far bigger for all of Hollywood? Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome back, and Merry Christmas Eve. We've got Lauren Connor joining us today to talk about whether or not we have now seen the end of Zack Snyder, given how poorly Rebel Moon is being reviewed. And we're not talking about the end of him as in the end of his life. No, we're talking about the end of him as in he may not be given the opportunity to control or to manage a large franchise or super big budget again. Although hope springs eternal. But Lauren, welcome back to the channel.
Thank you.
Now, Lauren, what we're talking about today, of course, is the review scores and aggregate of Rebel Moon Part 1. And this is, this is something we covered on the channel maybe 6 months ago. When the trailer first came out, there was tremendous excitement. People thought this was going to be the Star Wars killer. We even talked about that possibility here on the channel. And then a very interesting thing happened. And that was that, well, there was no promotion of this. And even despite the strikes, it went really, really quiet. And that caught our attention. Why was there no effort to try to bolster this at all? And so I think we're starting to see that given this 22% score here. And if we click on the 22%, what we find out, we always like to check this, all critics at 22%, top critics at 8%. So the people who don't have any kind of financial incentive to give a score one way or the other, 8%. And honestly, that's about as low as you could possibly ever see a movie go. I mean, this is getting into offensively bad territory. And so folks out there might say, Lauren, well, Pro, why are you guys not reviewing it? And the honest truth is, it's because it's so bad that we really don't want to review it. There are hundreds of channels out there that are going to provide reviews, and that's fine, and I think that's a great service. What we want to do, though, was go into a more meta discussion about this, because this is something that could have been a theatrical release, and it could have been part of the Star Wars franchise. Kathleen Kennedy passed on this. And of all the things that Kathleen Kennedy has ever done in her career, I now have to say that she may have chosen correctly to let this go. And that's an odd thing to say. But Lauren, walk us through what do you think the ramifications are for someone like Zack Snyder? There are a lot of people out there, they love the idea of the Snyderverse. They wanted the Snyderverse to be a thing. They wanted it to continue on. I'm starting to see now that the chances of a Snyderverse in anything ever coming to fruition is gone. Not just in comics, not just in superhero films, but also space, sci-fi, anything. It's probably that window is closing. Your thoughts on this?
I've got a few, but before I get into them, I want to preface this by saying I haven't seen the movie. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is that I actually don't have a Netflix subscription. The other is that I'm not a huge Zack Snyder fan. There's only one movie that he's produced that I've ever really cared for all that much, and I just kind of know he's not my cup of tea.
What was that movie, Lauren?
I actually liked Watchmen. I know a lot of people
Yep.
who are big fans of the comic are not huge fans of the movie, but I enjoyed it for what it was, and that's about the only Zack Snyder movie that I have enjoyed. And so I just kind of know that he's not my cup of tea. But that being said, I like the man himself as an individual. Everything that I've ever seen or heard of him, he seems like a genuinely nice fellow. I like the fact that he did try to create something, that he was a Star Wars fan, and that he wanted to do something that was in that vein. And I think that's not in and of itself a bad thing. I don't know that the failure of this movie necessarily portends the end for Zack Snyder. I think this is more another warning shot to Hollywood in general. I think what the audience is now saying is that we're done with the endless recycling and sequels and also rans. It's time to get back to doing something original, and I think that's being told to Hollywood across the board.
Lauren, let me push back just a little bit, but in a friendly way. And I also want to first confirm what you're saying about the personal aspect of this. I don't know Zack Snyder, but everything that I've seen of him, I have no animus towards him, and it's sort of like baseball or football or basketball or what have you. Just because someone is not a starter, that doesn't mean that you don't like them. It just means they don't have the ability to get you across the finish line or score the point or the touchdown or what have you. In this case, I don't know what franchise. I don't know what franchise could go to Zack Snyder at this point. I don't know what big budget could possibly go to him. Like, it's difficult for me to imagine somebody, a major studio, saying this is a wise return on investment. I mean, can you come up with anybody or anything that he would be well suited to do at this point?
Well, this is kind of what I'm trying to say, though. I don't think this is just a Zack Snyder thing. We were recently talking about J.J. Abrams. When's the last time you heard about J.J. doing anything? And for that
That's a
matter,
good point.
any other large franchise tentpole kind of pictures that have been trying to come out, I think with the exception of Godzilla minus one, has pretty much fallen on its face. And so I think that Zach, you're probably right. I don't see him getting a large franchise or tentpole film. I'm just not sure that franchise and tentpole films are really what's selling anymore. I think what the audience is
Okay.
saying is, show me something original.
You've brought up something. Okay, well, Lauren, you've taken this video in a totally different direction, and I think the audience appreciates that. I had never anticipated a philosophical conversation about this, but let's go there since you've done it. Lauren, okay, so there's two ways we can think on this. You're right in terms of the big blockbuster tentpole movies have not been doing well as of late. Now, there are exceptions to that. Avatar: The Way of Water, totally different. Spider-Man: No Way Home, totally different. Top Gun: Maverick, totally different. And yet,
How,
the
how
vast
long ago did those
majority,
movies come out, though?
granted, I'm with you. And so what I'm trying to think through here, Lauren, is the question to me would be, has the market moved on from that? And does the market want something different? And therefore, what we've witnessed since Jaws has now transmogrified into something different that the market is looking for? Or is it possible that for whatever reason, Hollywood in particular faces a strange difficulty in finding directors who can do what the directors of yore were able to do? So we've lost the Spielbergs and the Lucases. And so one of those two, you're exactly right. One of those two has to be right. Either we don't have the Spielbergs anymore, or we don't have the folks who wanted to go see the Spielbergs anymore. One of those two things had to change. Which do you think is the more likely?
Well, I think it depends on how you look at it, because these kind of things tend to be cyclical. I think it's important to remember that neither Spielberg nor Lucas were doing anything original themselves. What they were doing were taking the kind of movies and genres and things that interested them, sticking them in a blender and repackaging it for a new audience, which is kind of what the studios are trying to do now. But I think what they've done is they've gotten so comfortable in doing that and making cookie cutter product. They think if they can design something that fits within the boundaries of something that they think the audience already likes, then they just assume that they'll eat it up. And they've gotten lazy in trying to figure out what those little puzzle pieces are, and thinking you can just move a couple of those pieces and that'll be fine for the audience. And I think the audience is now telling them, no, we're done with this. Now you have to do something original. And I think that would be good for the studios in a couple of different ways. One, if you have somebody that has talent, and that's where you have to start. You have to have somebody who can both write a story with original concepts and compelling characters, and you have to have somebody that can direct and produce those kind of pictures. But if you're starting off with something new, not a franchise, not a tentpole, generally that means you don't know how the audience is going to receive it, and that means that you have some tighter boundaries that you have to exist within. Usually that means less special effects, less big spectacle, more focus on character. And I think right now that's what a lot of these movies are lacking. And so if a studio can be brave enough to take that kind of step. So think like a studio like A24 or somebody doing more independent um, uh, think piece pictures, let's call them, something that's really character driven. They may be rewarded if they hit on something that actually does catch the public's attention. And then maybe you can start building some new franchises. But it's going to take somebody to be brave enough to take those first steps.
Well, that's definitely true, and I would love to see, frankly, you brought up Godzilla minus one. I would love to see Takashi Yamasaki, the director of that film, brought in to work with Hollywood on the domestic side if he was not harangued and annoyed, harassed into following the Hollywood cookie cutter system. Um, the man is, I think he's the best director on the planet. I don't care where he's from. I don't care what language he speaks. 59 years old, looks like he's about 25 years old, and he can produce a movie that frankly gets everybody out there excited. So I would love to see directors with that kind of vision brought in, and then we'll test it out. We'll see which theory plays out. Is it the directors or is it the audience that has turned away from our current fare? But I think it goes without saying that whatever the case may be, Zack Snyder is not on a great trajectory here, and Rebel Moon might be just the final farewell. And that's what's being said now by CNN, although, of course, we don't think CNN is always the bastion of truth, nor do we think many other larger news outlets often are, simply by virtue of the fact that they're led by corporations. And, well, by virtue of the fact that they're part of a corporation, they have a corporate interest in how they present the news. Nevertheless, I think Brian Lowry is onto something over here on CNN. And this article, Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon gives him final cut on a sci-fi epic, just not a very good one. Here's what it says. Netflix is in the buzz attention business, which likely explains why the service would write what appears to have been a very big check to Justice League director Zack Snyder, letting him produce a two-part science fiction epic that will continue next year. Rebel Moon Part 1 and Child of Fire might have skipped the release, the Snyder Cut preliminaries, but only his most loyal fans will find much in this dreary exercise to warm them. And reminder, 8% of top critics liked this. Lauren, the other thing I would say about the Snyder situation here, and folks, I recommend you go read this review. I think it's just fine and dandy. The other thing, though, is that often when we would talk about the DC stuff that Snyder worked on, the claim would be made that he did not have the opportunity to do what he wanted to do. That's why you get the Snyder Cut. That's, you get the idea. I think Rebel Moon, the problem here is that it kind of exposes that even if Snyder's full desires and all of his whims come to fruition, it still doesn't make for the greatest piece of art. I can't say that for sure for DC, but we see when he gets full creative control from beginning to end that, at least in this case, with nearly a $200 million budget, it didn't go well. And so that makes me sad, honestly. Lauren, we needed, and I mean this truthfully, honestly, fervently, we needed him to succeed. We, the market, needed Zack Snyder to come through with this because we need an alternative to what Disney has done with Star Wars. And unfortunately, there is no real competitor right now. And because there's no competitor, there's no solid choice for people to flock to. There's just lackluster content now in this genre. And that's a sad place for the genre to be.
Yeah, I think my personal feeling on Zack Snyder has always been that he takes himself a little bit too seriously. In my opinion, he's very much a style over substance kind of guy. There's certain tells in his filmmaking where he loves the slow motion shot, and everything is always just dreadfully serious with him. At least in what I have seen of his work product. And if you're going to do a Star Wars style movie, there has to be a little bit of a wink at the audience to let them know that you're kind of in it with them. That, yeah, some of this is cheesy, but that's part of it. That's where the Flash Gordon aspect of it comes in. I don't know that Zach can pull that kind of thing off, and I think maybe if he had a little more fun with it, let a little more loose with it. Maybe had a bit more of a sense of humor about things. Again, I haven't seen this movie, so I don't know if he falls into those same little personal tropes as what I've seen in his other
It's hard to
products.
connect, Lauren. It's hard to connect with characters and care deeply about them. The story can be fantastic and very serious, but it's hard to connect with characters who are stoic. It's hard to connect with characters who don't laugh and have fun. You need those jokes. You need those moments of levity to pull in the care and the interest of the audience to those. Yeah.
Honestly, I think that's part of why he had a diehard contingent of fans for the DC universe, because DC was always seen as treating their superheroes as more like gods among men, whereas Marvel took the more humanistic and jokey approach, and they are different styles.
Right,
And
Spider-Man versus Batman. Yeah.
yeah, and so for that kind of superheroes as demigods, taking themselves seriously, Zack's probably the right guy to try and do that kind of thing. I just felt that he didn't quite understand these characters, and in trying to give them a darker spin, I think that turned off a lot of people.
Well, where I think this lands, and I think it's unfortunate. I don't want anybody out there to think that Pro is dancing on the grave here or whistling into the graveyard. But I do think that the unfortunate result of this is that I don't think Zack Snyder will be receiving anytime soon a significant budget to work on something like this again. Very sad. We want people to succeed. We want them to win. That's how we get good content. And when that doesn't happen, nobody wins in those scenarios. This is another one of those scenarios, unfortunately. Lauren, your point about the eye that this may be more broad than just Snyder, I think is well taken, well spoken, and we'll let the folks decide what they think in terms of the direction of movies going forward and what's going to happen to break through this trench that we're in at this point. That's the only word I can come up with for where we are. 2023 now, I've been noticing, Lauren, in many of the publications being declared the worst year for entertainment in modern history. I think that's right, largely led by Disney, but we see now that this actually bleeds into so many other companies, creatives, and studios. Lauren, final thoughts on where you think all of this is going? More, I guess, more broad than we already have been. What's going to happen to the space fantasy genre?
I think it's probably going to go a little bit dormant for a while, but I don't see that necessarily as a bad thing. I'm actually starting to get strangely excited about what I'm seeing because it's not just limited to Disney. Most of what I'm seeing is failure across the board. And that to me signals that the audience is being more discerning about how they're spending their money. And they're not just going to take it on faith that if you go to the movie theater, you're going to get good product. And so the studios, they could keep trying to push this, I think, for probably another year, but they can't do it indefinitely. If they ever want to operate at the levels that they once did, eventually they have to start producing something that the audience wants. And that means that the crop of talent that you have out there right now is either going to have to sharpen their skills and get better at what they do, or new people are going to have to come in and start producing content. And if that happens, that's where you start seeing these new visionaries start to pop up. So I think there's a possibility that sometime in the next year or two, we might see the beginnings of a renaissance. That's how I hope it goes. That's what I would like to see happen. Only time's going to tell if that's the way it actually goes, though.
Well, that's what we're pulling for here on the channel. I don't see how you could want anything else. I mean, we don't want the utter destruction of the entertainment industry, although we might like to see a vast changeover in the cast of characters producing, directing, and navigating our content, because clearly they are not up to the task as of late, with strong exceptions, the ones that we mentioned in this video, and there are more beyond that. Lauren, thank you so much for being here today and for helping us have a deeper conversation than I think many out there were expecting, but that is what we often find here on this channel as we endeavor to explain entertainment, keep you ahead of the culture curve, and dive into the waters as deep as they go when necessary. Lauren is fantastic at helping us navigate that. Folks, if you enjoyed this conversation, consider clicking the like button, share, subscribe, and when you click it, you stick it to the algorithms. It's the notification bell. Drop a comment down below. Let us know your thoughts. Your mind is a terrible thing to waste, so waste it not. Don't let this be just a dialogue between two people, but nay, we wish for it to be a conversation between an entire community, and you are part of that. Folks, we hope you're having a wonderful holiday season. Merry Christmas to one and all. Make sure you're spending time with those who love you and who you love. And folks, if you are having a time that is not quite so jolly and merry, we're pulling for you, and you're just the kind of person that we hope to see succeed very, very soon. So hang in there. These times are sometimes tough for lots of folks out there, either because of loneliness or because of loss. And those are both legitimate reasons to be kind to one another and help each other through. All right, folks, that's a wrap for today. We will continue to keep you ahead of that culture curve, though. The audit continues, and Lauren Connor will be there as we look at how we performed with scoops in the year 2023. 90% accuracy rating so far in the scoops that we have audited. We'll see if we can maintain that. Might be tough, but we'll find out. Wherever you are and whatever you're doing, keep learning, keep growing, and keep having fun.
Wilton, you know you're not allowed in the kitchen. And, it smells like burning dog hair. What are you doing in here?
Well, I got a DM from Slade Wilson on how to roast Jonas. I mean, I didn't bother reading it, because I already have the perfect plan.
Wait a minute. So you're challenging Slade?
Well, not really. It's more like what Kathleen Kennedy and Kevin Feige do to Disney. A tag team of destruction. Plus, we're also making sure that everyone knows to subscribe to WDW Pro this Christmas.
Well, I appreciate you helping Pro, but doing one good thing does not make up for both of you doing a bad thing. Pro's making sure everyone gets accurate information and stays ahead of the culture curve, but, oh man, what is that smell? You're not really...
Oh, yeah, no, I'm literally roasting Jonas in the oven. I mean, it was kind of confusing when we were going with that line of questioning in the first place.
Roasting someone's a figure of speech. You don't actually cook them. Somebody. Oh my, hang on, Jonas. Well, I hope you're happy about what you've done this Christmas, Wilton. You almost ended Jonas.
On the brighter side, he looks great with that new tan. I guess you could say I gifted him a nice complexion.